Hello, I hope you're doing well today. My name is Ian Green, and I'm the musician for Music Dreams and also for Ian J. Green, two different artist profiles you can find wherever you stream your music. And today we're going to be looking at part 4 of the chapter on intervals, which I call Unit 9 in this set of tutorials, which helps to support the Intermediate Elementary Music Rudiments theory book as written by Mark Sarnecki. We're going to be working on a couple of the different questions on page 42. Let's jump right in. So first of all, what we want to see is how when you have different intervals, first you want to make sure that you recognize what type of note you have at the bottom. And then that will help to determine what type of scale you want to think about with specific key signatures. And then how does that scale relate to the top note? Is it part of the major scale or is it not? So let's look at E major. Now we know that E major has 4 sharps: F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, and D sharp. So we want to keep that in mind. Now let's count up the number of notes between E and D. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is going to be a seventh of some sort. Now if we go back to that handy dandy chart that we had on page 41, we know that traditionally in a major scale, a seventh is going to be a major interval. So then in the scale of E major with 4 sharps, the correct answer for a major interval would be D sharp. But in this case, that is not the case. So we have, instead of a major interval, in this specific example with E and D above, this is actually a minor seventh. Now it says to name each of the following intervals and then rewrite each as an augmented interval by changing the upper note. So if we go from minor, then we want to go over to augmented. First, we have to go from minor to major by changing the top note up a half step, which would mean going from E and then D as a minor interval. To have it major, we would go E to D sharp. But then we would keep going. We would then make that interval augmented by changing the top note one more time. Now, something that's interesting with intervals is that you cannot change the note name itself, but the accidentals can totally change. So in this case, going from a minor seventh up to an augmented seventh, we would have D double sharp. Because as you know, in the scale of E major, first we would have E to D sharp to make it major, but then we need to go and raise that note again one extra half step, which would mean having a D double sharp in this example. Let's go over to the piano and I'll play that as well. E to D, major, augmented. Now let's go to the next one, D flat, and think of the major scale for this. But first, we want to count how many notes we have in between. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now we can see how we would have, traditionally in a major scale, a perfect fifth. Now let's see if that is the case. Does the top note match to be a perfect fifth from the bottom note? So in the key signature of D flat major, we have 5 flats. B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, and G flat. So A flat is part of that scale, so this is therefore a perfect fifth. So to make that an augmented interval, we would need to put a D flat on the bottom and then raise that up a half step to create a perfect interval into augmented by putting an A natural to create an augmented fifth. Let's do this one here. We start on F, and think of the scale of F major, which has B flat. Now if we count all the way up, every note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, we have an octave here, which is a perfect interval if this was part of a major scale. So now you can see how there are no other special accidentals on this top note. So this note is part of the major scale of F major, so therefore this is a perfect octave. But now what we need to do is change the top note into an augmented interval by raising a perfect interval up a half step. So we keep the bottom note the same, but then we add an F sharp above to create an augmented octave. I do hope this information was helpful, and I encourage you to watch this video a few times. Even though it might be the same examples a few times, you'll see the process of how to find and create special types of intervals like augmented and diminished intervals. First, what you want to do is think of the major scale of the bottom note. That's the first thing. Second thing, count the space between the bottom note and the top note to see if you're using a perfect or a major interval as your starting point. Then think of the key signature of the bottom note and see how that information matches with the top note of the interval that's given in the question. And then you can see what you need to do to change to create the type of interval that you're being asked. If you follow that set of steps every time, finding and naming intervals using the bottom note will always be the same. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.